다음으로, so next, now we're here at Touching Childhood Memory of the Korean War, shared by Esther Kim. So, is going to introduce.
Of course, we must introduce Esther Kim, as she is a seasoned educator with over 41 years of experience teaching library media, ESL, English as a second language, and Korean language and culture across public schools in Arizona, Michigan, Virginia, and the Department of Defense dependent schools in Germany and Korea. She has also taught Korean language and culture at the University of Maryland Global Campus and McLean Korean Academy. Esther holds a Bachelor of Arts in German Literature and Language from Hankuk University of Foreign Studies in Seoul, Korea, and a Master of Library Science from East Carolina University. In addition to her teaching roles, she has now been an active volunteer with the North Korea Freedom Coalition and serves as an advisor for the Alliance for Korea United Washington. A big round of applause for Esther Kim.
Good afternoon. It's been a great honor to be invited to speak about my personal story before the distinguished guests, Korean War veterans of Korea and the United States, at this very noble MacArthur Memorial place to commemorate Korean War. I was a little girl, but I remember it vividly. I thought something serious was happening because of the adult anxious appearance. The adults were diligently packing their bags in large backpacks, and the sound of gunfire was heard from afar, heightening the atmosphere of anxiety. The night before, someone knocked loudly on the door of my house, and when my eldest brother quietly opened the door, one of his students was breathing very heavily and said in a very tense voice, "Teacher, please get out of here quickly. I heard secret information that leftist students are going to capture you and bring you back to People's Court." At that time, my eldest brother had come down to Jeonju for a while to teach math at high school after quitting government job in Seoul. So my eldest brother quickly packed his bags and fled somewhere that night. At home, there were only my father, my mother, my older sister, my sister-in-law, my niece who was younger than me, and the girl who helped my sister-in-law take care of the housework. My third brother attended 4th grade of Sinŭiju Dongjung Middle School in the north, but he felt a sense of futility about communism and joined the group of refugees who were heading to the south. He bravely defected alone to South Korea and came down to Jeonju, where his older brother lived, and was attending Sinŭ High School at that time. Before the outbreak of the tragic Korean War, the atmosphere at the school was extremely tense due to clashes between leftist wing and rightist wing students. My third brother, who felt his life was in danger as an escapee from the north, volunteered as a student soldier, so-called 학도병, in South Korean Army. When he said goodbye to my mother before leaving for the front lines wearing the military helmet, I was right there next to him. I still remember his military helmet was so big that it covered his eyebrows and my mother's sad face. Before I tell you my third brother's story of the Korean War, I would like to briefly introduce my the story of my family who were displaced people. My father was the head of the rural village near Sinuiju, North Pyongyang province in the north, and was in charge of the village's litigation and big landowner. My mother was a typical good wife and dedicated mother. In fact, I was the 11th child, but the 4th, you can imagine 11th, okay? And the 4 children before me died in infancy. The turning point that began to cast a dark cloud over our happy family was the land reform policy that enabled the government to confiscate of the land and houses and everything from the landlords and redistribute all things to tenant farmers for free. Although it was called free distribution, the ownership of the land completely belonged to the communist government, and they could not do anything, they just worked. The first thing Kim Il-sung implemented as soon as he took over the communist regime was the land reform. Because of this land reform, my family lost everything. And in 1948, when I was just 3 years old, my parents, with their unmarried children, escaped to South Korea, where my eldest brother's family lived. According to my mother, one day in 1948, the people who used to work for us as a tenant farmers with red armbands on their arms and shouted to leave the house within 48 hours, each carrying a bundle we could carry. I was suffering a high fever at the time because I had measles. Can you imagine having to leave your beloved home within 48 hours, leaving all your belongings behind? My courageous mother, holding the sick baby, me, appealed with tears to the people with the red armband. This sick baby is my last child. I could not have any more. And now she's suffering with contagious disease. How we can live in 48 hours? Let General Kim Il-sung come to arrest me. I cannot live. Mothers can be really, really strong. The people who knew my mother used to be gentle and kind to them while they worked for my family, told my mother, "You may leave the house in 1 month under that circumstance." Due to my timely sickness, my family earned 1 month to sell things and was able to say goodbye to the married children before they escaped to the south. My family, pretending to be from a very poor farming family, traveled to Jeju, where my father hired a guide. Following our guide, we waited for the tide to fall in there and walked across the muddy West Sea. My sister, who was carrying me on her back, walked as fast as she could, but when we almost reached Cheongdan in the south, currently that Cheongdan belonged to the Hwanghae province in North Korea, the seawater came up to her shoulders. I, lying on my sister's back, was just so quiet that my mother thought, I had died from the shock of the cold water. So when she pulled my neck, looking at me on my sister's back, she was relieved to see me smiling brightly. My mother said that if I had cried at that time, my whole family would have been shot to death by the security police who were trying to stop refugees from crossing over to the south, and I saved my whole family by not crying. If you read biographies of displaced people. There are stories of them giving small children, kind of a cranky babies, very small amount of opium so they could not cry. That's how our family became displaced people. Until the day before my mother passed away, she prayed very fervently for the unification of the Korean Peninsula. I often saw her shedding tears alone out of longing for older daughters and sons she left behind in the north. All displaced people, including my family, are the victims of the sad history of the divided Korea. Currently, in Korea, many first-generation displaced people are unable to go to their hometown. Of course, there's the DMZ, and so many people are passed away. And then, the remaining people are just too old. They are close to 100, 95, 97, like that. This is the tragedy of divided country in the world. Only divided country in the world, Republic of Korea. Now back to my third brother's story. My third brother, who enlisted as a student soldier, learned simple shooting skills with other student soldiers, was immediately deployed to the Battle of Pohang. Maybe some of you remember Pohang too? However, just before being deployed to the front, a medical officer witnessed my brother clutching his stomach from a sudden severe abdominal pain and said, "If you are deployed to that condition, you will die. Just stay with me and stay in the rear and be a medic." So, because of his sudden abdominal pain, my brother survived the death. He wanted to be an officer rather than a private, even if he only lived one day. So he received 6 months of officer training and was commissioned as a Mayfly second lieutenant, an informal term for the position because many officers would die in a single day while leading from the front lines. He made brilliant contributions to the front lines and in the Jirisan guerrilla suppression operation, for which he awarded medals. However, during the operation, he fell from a very high rock and got caught on a tree branch, barely escaping death, but sustained serious injuries from this. So he was honorably discharged as an army captain. After recovery, he went to college and majored in law, and after graduating college, he worked as a military training and social studies teacher at the Jeonju Teachers College for a while. At that time, I was in the 5th grade at elementary school, and my brother's former students of the Teachers College became my homeroom teacher. The teacher sometimes invited my Army veteran brother to tell us about his experiences in the Korean War. Although my brother was weak due to the after effect of his injury, I could not be happier in front of my friends, and I was so proud of my brother while listening to his war stories. I have heard many war stories, but I will introduce only one that is unforgettable to me. In the early winter 1951, when the Korean War was in full swing, my brother's platoon was surrounded by the People's Army at twilight. A People's Army officer ordered everyone to line up. At the People's Army, officers ordered to fire, machine guns began to fire. My brother, who was standing in the middle, suddenly felt an itch on his ankle, so he just bent down to scratch it. Thanks to God, a bullet passed by. He lay down on the spot. and pretended to be dead. When he got up lightly to see what's going on, because everything was so quiet, and he found out he was the only one who survived. He said that he had experienced a similar near-death situation many times, but he was able to survive thanks to the prayers of our mother, who prayed very hard day and night in tears. And he often said he was very grateful to Almighty God. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to end my story by reminding the younger generation here today's prosperous and world tense economy, the Republic of Korea exists thanks to the devotion and sacrifice of the Korean veterans of the Korean War, who, like my brother, devoted themselves to the country, as well as the veterans of the United States and other 15 foreign countries that fought hard in severe cold and harsh conditions in an unknown land. I sincerely express my gratitude and respect to these people. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Esther Kim, for bravely sharing your memories with us. Your